The president is sounding the alarm on climate change, another threat to the population around the world. After touring storm-battered areas in New Jersey and New York yesterday, the president warned this was a sure sign of a nation and a world in peril. He says drastic action is needed to combat climate change after seeing the destruction left by Hurricane Ida firsthand.
Climate change poses an existential threat to our lives, to our economy, and the threat is here. It's not going to get any better. We got to listen to the scientists and the economists and the national security experts. They all tell us this is code red. The nation and the world are in peril.
Ida is blamed for more than 50 deaths in the Northeast. The president urged Congress to pass a $3.5 trillion infrastructure budget plan to protect against future major storms like this one.
From hurricanes to raging wildfires in California, the dramatic extreme weather events seen this summer have even triggered a call to action from the Catholic Church. Christian leaders, including the Pope, issued a statement urging world leaders to address the challenges of climate change, saying that this is a, quote, immediate and urgent matter of survival. Pope Francis is expected to attend the UN's climate talks scheduled for November in Glasgow, Scotland. The conference was originally scheduled for last year, but was postponed because of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, activists are ramping up pressure to delay the event again because of a rise in coronavirus cases around the world. For more on all of this, let's bring in Nancy Cordes. She joins us now from the White House. So Nancy, you know, we heard a lot from the president about how we need the proper infrastructure to protect communities that are vulnerable to the dramatic events that occur with climate change. And that has to do with passing those infrastructure bills, the budget bill and the infrastructure bill. Democratic leaders are hoping to have the spending bills passed by the end of this month. Where do things stand?
Well, they're still working on that big $3.5 trillion spending bill in the House, Anne Marie, and that is going to be a heavy lift, mostly because it is so expensive. Yes, some of it does deal with climate change, but it really covers a range of Democratic priorities. And the reality is that because Republicans have made it clear they are not on board. The Republican leader Mitch McConnell said again yesterday there is not going to be a single Republican supporter for that bill. That makes it all the more crucial that Democrats keep their entire party together. But you've got just a few folks like Joe Manchin of West Virginia saying we should take a pause. This is too much money. In fact, Axios reporting overnight that Manchin would only support something about half that size, and his vote is critical. So when the president was asked about all of this yesterday as he returned from New York and New Jersey, he said, well, I've been working with Joe Manchin a long time. I'm going to get on the phone with him, and I'm sure that we can work something out in the end. But clearly he's got his work cut out for him based on what we're hearing about Manchin's preferences. And the reality is that we are in a situation where even one Democrat in the Senate can hold things up if this bill's not going to get any Republican support.
Nancy, let me ask you about COVID. As you know, cases are up dramatically, and hospitals across the country are seeing the greatest number of patients since the pandemic began. How does the president plan to address this phase of the pandemic right now in that speech he's giving tomorrow?
Right. So the White House says that he is going to unveil a new 6-point plan to tackle COVID cases tomorrow. They haven't given us many more details than that. Even the president yesterday was saying, when he was asked about this, you know, just wait and see what I have to say. Hard to imagine that they will be unveiling some major new initiatives at this point in the pandemic that we haven't seen in various forms before. They've been trying to throw everything they've got at this pandemic for a long time. But it's important to this White House and this president to make it clear that they are doing everything they can, especially in the face of these rising case numbers, rising hospitalizations, just as kids go back to school.
What is in the toolbox for the federal government, though, when it comes to encouraging people to get vaccinated, other than the influence that the government can have over, you know, government agencies? Then what? They can't sort of issue a broad mandate for vaccinations. Monetary encouragement has only, I think, had a marginal impact when it comes to getting people to be vaccinated. So what can the federal government do?
Right. The reality is that they are limited in what they can do if they aren't willing to go in the direction that some other countries have. Countries like France, where they require people to show proof of vaccination even when they go into restaurants and bars and things like that. This administration has made it very clear that they're not comfortable with the idea of a federal blanket vaccine mandate. They prefer for that to be handled at the state and local level or by businesses. They are not going to get into the business of requiring anybody but federal employees to go ahead and get vaccinated. So the question is, what else can they do? As you pointed out, Anne-Marie, they've already tried incentivizing people. They certainly always hail any private business that announces new measures, either to impose vaccine mandates or even, in the case of companies like Delta Airlines, for instance, to make it clear that people are going to pay more for their health insurance if they don't get vaccinated. So they're all for a lot of these private sector approaches, but we haven't seen for some time the Biden administration itself saying that it is going to do something new and dramatic to try to get more people vaccinated. And in fact, there's still a great deal of uncertainty even around the push for boosters. And hopefully we'll get more clarity from the president on that tomorrow, because remember, he said not that long ago that the government was going to be rolling out a plan for people to start getting boosters in September. And then the FDA kind of put the brakes on that, said they weren't sure that everybody actually did need to get boosters. So I think there are a lot of Americans wondering whether they are among those that should get a booster or not, and when. So hopefully we'll get some more details from the president about that tomorrow, too.
Nancy, the president is also preparing to deliver remarks from the White House this morning in honor of labor unions. This comes as a recent Gallup poll finds Americans' approval of labor unions has risen over the past year. What's the White House strategy for cultivating closer ties? I mean, the president has fairly close ties to unions and union officials. But it is interesting that this rising support for polls in this country has happened over the course of this pandemic.
Right, and unions are vital unions are vital to this White House. Sorry, go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Sorry, Nancy. Sorry, I was just going to say that, you know, the union membership had been declining for many years, and it's over the pandemic that it's actually sort of seen a little tiny bit of an uptick, and it has to do with the fact that, you know, over the pandemic there's been a lot of layoffs, but people who have been in unions have been able to protect their jobs, which I think might explain the uptick in support for unions. Sorry, Nancy.
No, that is a really important point. And unions are so vital both to this administration and to the Democratic Party in general. You really ignore their power and influence at your peril if you are a Democrat. And you're right that President Biden does have a very long history with unions, a long affinity with them. He's Scranton Joe, after all, and has talked a lot about the union members in his family. And this is a relationship that he has put front and center in his presidency. He has met with union leaders repeatedly, and he understands very well that when we move into the midterm elections, the organizing power of unions is sort of second to none in this country. And so, you know, this is the kind of love that this White House is going to show to unions today and repeatedly over the course of his presidency.
So, Nancy, the nation is going to mark 20 years since the September 11th attacks. We're learning more about the president's plans to commemorate the victims and the heroes of that day. What stops will the president be making on Saturday?
Yes, so he is going to be going to all the sites where the planes crashed on 9/11 for this 20th anniversary. He'll be going with the First Lady to Ground Zero in New York City, to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, to the Pentagon for a wreath-laying ceremony. The Vice President will join him on a couple of those stops as well. So it will be a very somber morning, this 20th anniversary. We don't know much more about whether he plans to give remarks at any of these events or whether he'll simply be there to lay a wreath and to join in those who are mourning those we lost on that day. But definitely he plans to pay his respects at all 3 locations on Saturday.
All right, Nancy Cordes for us at the White House. Nancy, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too.